Alright, this video is going to take you through a nested if demonstration, and so we're going to get right into it here. So let's say that we have a program here and we have an if-else structure, and just to show you, there is actually another if-else structure inside of this if-else structure. So it's important, and I'm covering this up because what happens is when some students see another if-else structure in the program, it can be kind of confusing. So what you need to be able to see is you need to be able to see the outer if. You need to be able to see the outer if. The outer if is begun by the very first if statement that you see. Alright, so this is the beginning of an if-else structure. Since it's the first thing you see, it's just like this. If we have a big container, and inside of that container we put a smaller container, notice that when you approach it, you reach the outer container first before you get to the inner. And so that's what's happening here, is that you're reaching the outer container first, the if-else structure. And so this has how many options? Well, how many clauses does it have? It has this clause and the else clause. So it has two options that it's going to pick from. So either the compiler is going to execute door number 1, or it's going to execute door number 2. It's got to pick, and the decision is based on whether something is true or false. And so the condition in this case is num1 being less than num2. So num1 is 10 and num2 is 15. And so that is true. And so that means that tells the compiler makes a decision, and okay, well then I'm going to execute the if clause. I'm going to execute door number 1, and I'm going to ignore door number 2. And this is important that you see it like this. And so right now we're not seeing the other if-else structures, but they're there. All right, and so it's going to execute door number 1. So we go to door number 1 now, and inside door number 1 we have another if-else structure. And so now you need to now look at this as being the only thing in the program, because again, students will look at this in light of everything else and then they'll get confused. So now just treat this as if this if-else structure is alone and by itself. So now you go into here and you go, okay, num1, which is 10, plus 3, which is 13, is that greater than 15? Well, no, it's not. And so the compiler will ignore the if clause and execute the else clause, and then it's going to print goodbye. So that's all it's going to do, is it's going to print goodbye. Alright, so now notice then, and this is where some students get hung up, is they want to go in and do the other if-else structure inside here. But notice it's being ignored, so you don't even see it. It's ignored. It's only going to do this one if-else structure. So really, the compiler has executed two if-else structures. The first one made the decision, do I do the if clause or the else clause? And then when it got into the if clause, it goes, oh, I have another decision to make. And so it goes through and it executes that if-else clause, and then it's done. You're done with the whole. Now the outer if-else clause is done once you've executed the clause of choice, so to speak. So let's get rid of this, and let's put this back, and then let's say that this is, let's say this is 20. And so, is 20 less than 15? Well, that's false. So it ignores door number 1, the if clause, and then it executes the else clause. And the else clause happens to have another if-else clause. Now, num1 is 20, and 20 minus 8 is 12. Is 12 less than num2? Is it less than 15? So is 12 less than 15? Yes, it is. So it's going to execute the if clause and ignore the else clause, and so it's going to print Bravo. Now, the thing to notice here, which is the key idea here, is nested ifs are used when when the execution of an event requires more than one condition to be true. So the event here is printing the word Bravo. All right, that's the event. In order for that event to happen, there's two conditions that had to be true. The first condition was num1 had to be less than num2. I'm sorry, actually that num1 less than num2 had to be false. And then the next condition was that num1 minus 8 had to be less than num2. So those are two conditions that had to be met in order for this event, the printing of Bravo, to take place. And so this is called the nested if, okay, inside, or the inner if, and then and those are within the outer if. So that should do it.